Good morning. Welcome to episode 37 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the water and drilling industry. We have a great week. We are going to continue our discussion with Jake Fletcher and Robert Meyer, where we transition from talking hiring and start discussing working, expectations, and benefits, not only for veterans, but for all employees. However, before we start, there are two pieces of news I need on your radar. Last week during COP27, that's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. These are the countries that committed to the Kyoto Agreement and the Paris Agreement. Spain and Senegal announced an alliance to share water scarcity technology and expertise, where they're going to put money together, millions of euros, and get other countries involved in a collective of sharing knowledge for technology and expertise to fight water scarcity. This is what was stated by the UN. Droughts have become 29% more frequent across the globe since 2000, as warming temperatures exacerbate the influence of forest degradation and poor land management and drying out previously temperate regions. This jumps right into the other piece of news where we're going to see oral arguments very soon, and that is the Navajo Nation versus the United States Department of the Interior. The nation is challenging the department to develop plans to provide the reservation with adequate water. You got to see it this way. The Colorado River flows through 7 southwestern states, multiple reservations, including the Navajo Nation being one of the biggest ones. And we've talked about the federal infrastructure dollars right now to get more wells and get clean water, but they need access, just like the states, to the Colorado River, not only for their people, but for crops and industry. It's going to be a big discussion, and it needs to be on our radar. Now, let's jump back into our discussion with Jake Fletcher and Rob Meyer.
It's a crazy dichotomy because we expect all of the positives of military discipline and reliability and everything that we as civilians respect about the Marines and the Air Force and the Army and the Navy and the Coast Guard, and then the rest of it.
Force. And
What's
the Space
that?
Force.
And the Space Force. There you go. I mean, I do need to be able to relate with those guys because I need to go drill on an asteroid with Harry Stamper and whatnot. But it's odd because we're like, okay, we have somebody that's got their stuff together because they've been in the military and now they're out.
There's expectations on both sides here, okay? So transitioning out, I had certain expectations of what I thought employment was. And luckily I went into an environment with a lot of folks that had come out of the military, and so they were able to help me with that transition. But you have to be careful with the expectations that you just laid out there, reliability, dependability, and et cetera, because what that translates into is expectations. And expectations have to be achievable by all involved. And so we can't just to say that somebody has spent some years in the military and has their shit together, that might not be correct. I mean, they have the same challenges as any other human in the world, and so part of that is giving those folks the same grace as you would anybody else coming off the street. Well, I can't believe you're having this issue. You spent, 4 years doing this. Well, I'm still a human. All right. And not to mention that 4 years that I spent doing that, I was doing that and not all of the other family stuff. And so now I need to spend some time working on that. And so, I think that there are some unfair expectations, especially relating to what reliability, dependability, and accountability mean for folks coming out of the military by employers that are hiring, saying, "Oh, you were a gunny. I need you to come in and be the gunny." I'm like, "Oh, what is it? Really? Do you really want me to do that? Because if I do that, that means I'm going to be screaming at them and you. You know, that's just kind of how it works. And so, you know, it's, I don't know where it comes from. Maybe a little bit movies and TV and all of that stuff. But realistic expectations need to be had by all.
Yeah, I mean, just because somebody's in the military doesn't necessarily mean they were a great troop or a great person. You know, we still have our share of people who don't fit the mold or for whatever reason came in the military. You know, whether it was they wanted benefits and they thought it was going to be easier or different than they thought. And, you know, as an officer, I had my share of troops that, you know, just weren't the right type of guys. And, you know, it's interesting. I always tried to help those people because this is what we were trained to do as officers, to figure out maybe there's a different career path in the military even that would help keep those people on, because that was our goal, is to try and limit people going out the door, you know, when we were in the military. But yeah, expectations. I've definitely heard, you know, it's almost like a stereotype. You know, you're like, just because I was in there doesn't mean like, oh, you know, I worked for a project manager when I first got out, and I was a project engineer, so it was my first job. And right before I left this job, he said something to me that just kind of threw me for a loop. He was like, "We brought you in for your leadership ability, and I expect you to lead and train these other peers of yours on the staff." And I looked at him and I said, "So you want me to do your job? You're the project manager. You're supposed to be the leader of this team. So you brought me in to be a leader. So do you want me to do your job and then you can just go away?" You know, and it was just a really funny conversation, because it was like, so you brought me in for this skill set, but that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and you know, that expectation is okay if communicated, right? Like, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I'm really weak at leading and mentorship, and I really need to find somebody that can help me in that regard. But there's a couple of issues. Issue number one is, what is your title, and what are the credentials expected? I mean, that's the other thing going on out of transitioning is there may be all of these personal qualities that Jake meets within what someone is looking for, but there's a couple of credentials that he doesn't have. And so that may shut him down because some HR person is doing the screener and said, well, the hiring manager mandated these two credential pieces. And that doesn't mean that Jake doesn't know how to do them. It just means that he doesn't have the letters that prove that he knows how to do it. But going back to your story, Jake, you know, I had a boss that just wasn't a great mentor. And he indicated like, hey, these are my challenges, and this is what I need help with. And I said, okay, got it. But to hire somebody for what I would consider a staff engineer perspective or position, and then say, hey, I need you to be the leader amongst your peers. Well, that's not, I mean, in the civilian world, more so than in the military. Like in the military, it's not uncommon to say, hey, this is your rank, but you're going to have this billet, right? And so billet and rank are two different things. A billet would be like a position versus your rank on your collar. But in the civilian world, dude, people do not respond well to that. You know, it's like, well, why is she or he in that role? Why do I have to listen to what they say? What do they know? And I would, if I were Jake and somebody told me that, I'd be like, what do I know? What business do I have leading these people? I was on a drill rig in Nevada, you know, in the middle of the desert in Nevada a month ago. What do I know about engineering on this construction project? You know, obviously I know the basics of engineering, but I don't know the deliverable schedule and all of that stuff. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying, Jake.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite experiences that I always reference when I write articles or talk leadership with people, because whole project was a lesson to me into, what I actually knew as a leader and what I saw in other people in my first experience in the civilian world. The other piece, and I've been talking a lot about this in my grad school classes, is because I just took a class on human resources, is the different types of benefits offered to people and really explaining those benefits to people. So like, for instance, the school district, people I brought in and gotten hired with us at the school district, they're always like, oh, the pay is a little bit less. And I'm like, listen, you got to look at the whole package of things that is offered here, because look, here's your paycheck. I said, but you also get 14 sick days a year that just get dropped in your account, 14 federal holidays, and then you get 2 days of leave, like the military, a month. And I was like, I did the math. I said, I got more days off here than I did in the military. I said, so to me, I can take a little bit of difference in pay because that gives me the flexibility to do, to be closer to my family, have more stability. And so I think a lot of companies don't do a great job of really explaining the different benefits that they have and really offering more options to people to kind of craft, the benefits that best suit what they want, because not everybody wants the same thing. Some people want a high paycheck and they don't really care about not having days off. Other people be willing to, adjust their pay scale a bit or whatever, to have a little bit more stability. So that's a big challenge, not just for keeping veterans, but just people in general, because people have really become more aware and vocal of the things that they want as far as benefits when they come to a company.
Yeah, I think that goes to management in general, regardless of military or not. I mean, one of my biggest challenges was as transitioning from a field employee into a management position is the whole benefits discussion, compensation, all of it, and coming to understand, because, when I first started managing people in the civilian world, I was only like 24 and I didn't know, being naive, I'm like, I just assume everybody wants the same things that I do, and it's just not the case. But not only that is people coming out of the military don't know how to negotiate a compensation package. Like, come on, like, they're throwing these astronomical compensation numbers. You hear about, Tesla coming to Austin and the average compensation, $100,000 a year. Do you think that that's all getting paid in salary? I mean, really? Come on now. No, they are providing a compensation package value assessment. And so, people hear, oh, well, Tesla in Austin's offering $100,000. No, they're not. They're offering $100,000 in benefits. And mind you, probably 20 grand of that is health insurance. And that's not actually what they're paying. That's the street value of what they're paying to the insurance company. And so, it's good marketing by some of these bigger companies to say, oh, these are $100,000 jobs. And that's what they're promising the Economic Development Corporation that just gave them a sweet ass tax deal on that property. But what it comes down to is figuring out, like Jake said, what is important to you? Is it just paycheck? Is that it? Because as an employer, yeah, we can start trimming down some other benefits. But the flip side of that is employers being too rigid in their policies relating to benefits, specifically PTO, sick time, health insurance, all of these things, because they are afraid of someone accusing them of being unfair in their application of a flexible benefits package. There are any number of people in any organization that feel that they're undervalued, underpaid, overworked, whatever. But those same people also are not going to have the initiative, the tact, and the respect to come up to their manager and say, hey, look, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I'm undervalued. I'm feeling like I'm underpaid, and I'm feeling like I'm overworked. Because as a manager, those are all great conversations for me to tackle and know about. And so, part of transitioning is being comfortable to go to your boss and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling. Challenge your boss to solve the problem, because that's literally what their job is. Help me solve this issue.
It's it's unique because in construction, electrician, pipe fitters, carpenters are compensated the most, when we lump drilling and everything else that's happening all into that. And compensation for the drilling industry or the laborer industry, sure, we get the benefits figured out and we have this hourly wage. But like right now, there's a discussion about hours of work policy that I've been listening to. And there's plenty of men and women that are going, I need my overtime. I'm going to work 55 or 60 hours a week. And I always question to myself, are we working 60 hours a week because that's how much time it takes for us to complete the job? Or are we working 60 hours a week because that is the living wage that the team needs? That they got the benefits, they got that piece, but now in order to pay off whatever debt or house or vehicle, now the vehicles are the same as a mortgage, to drive a new vehicle with insurance, it's unique when we look at being financially responsible, and obviously my buddies that were in San Diego with the Marines, one of the first things, Tony Brokaw with Midwest Geothermal, he would say the first thing that I tell my guys when they get there is, listen, don't go off base and buy a car. Like there was just used car dealerships up and down the strip. He's like, don't go buy a car.
Well, that's always the first thing anybody buys when they get their military paycheck. You always see so many people just roll up in new vehicles, and then they can't even afford to put the gas in it because, that was a common occurrence.
Yeah, but I also, there's a lot to unpack in what you just talked about, Brock. On the new car thing, I mean, the military is set up really well for people that have zero financial security in their life to all of a sudden overnight have financial security. And so, there's all sorts of cultural reasons in America about nice things, and why people want this or that or whatever. But at the end of the day, what it boils down to is all of a sudden somebody feels like they have a steady paycheck and they have assigned a value to a thing, and they are willing to forego that entire paycheck in order to have this thing. And, being the more mature people in the unit, we're telling them, yes, that may be what you think right now, but just give it a year as you figure out what's important to you, especially because we're about to be gone and that thing's just going to be sitting there on the asphalt collected dust for the next 6 months. And you're going to be like, why am I throwing away my paycheck on this thing that I can't even use? As an employer, we want to be able to provide other things outside of compensation that keep people around, new equipment, new facilities or facilities that are in good condition, higher wages, all of these things. Like as an employer, yes, I mean, I would love for everyone that works in the drilling department at Talon to make more than enough money than they need. But there's a seesaw of benefits versus work, and we have to get the work to pay the benefits. And so it just comes down to how to do the work more efficiently, or how to sell value outside of productivity and schedule and those types of things, which can be done, but your possible client list shrinks the further you push that. And so there's always the flip side of, well, what if we don't have any work to do? Then the job goes away. And so I'm not trying to make an argument in either direction. I mean, I see the benefits and associated with both, but what I would argue is that for a lot of people, I would be willing to bet that if they were offered a higher wage in order to work less hours, they would still pick up more shifts to get better overtime checks at that higher wage.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the reasons I took my job is because sitting on the owner's side of the table, representing the school district, I got tired of, the first couple jobs I had. I got tired of being compensated for 40 hours and it being expected to work 60 or 70 because there were demands for the job. And I understood it. I understood, why it was like that. I get it. There were large companies or medium companies that trying to make deadlines and things like that. But I just, that's where I figured out what I wanted to do and what type of work was best for me is, the type of work I'm doing now, and being back on the owner's side of the table like I was in the military. And so it's really interesting because we still have guys in our maintenance department even that'll do that stuff that you're talking about, Robert, is, they'll have a pretty good wage as far as, a maintenance carpenter or whatever, and they'll still look for those overtime hours. And
it's really difficult because, especially when I was working in California, we would have prevailing wages for drillers at like $52 an hour, which is great, really awesome for those guys to be able to work that. It makes the projects really difficult to bid effectively and for the company to still make money, because a day of standby time due to weather means something totally different than a regular job, because now your cost of that standby day for a normal job may be $1,000 or $1,500, and now that day of standby is $3,000 or more. And how do you build that into the bid and still remain competitive? And if you don't win enough, then the drillers are like, "What the heck? Why are we not getting these prevailing wage opportunities?" And it's like the self-perpetuating discussion. And I know we're getting way off the whole Veterans Day topic, but it's crazy how integrated all of these discussions are.
It is crazy, but at the end of the day, it's about taking care of our people and knowing that somebody's got our back, and that's very much, we need to have the veterans back. I appreciate both of your guys' insight today, and I'll open it up for last thoughts on either of you hiring veterans right now. Are you seeking out? Have you found the place that you say, "Hey, I like what I'm doing and I wish more veterans were doing it"?
yeah, I guess I'll go first. I think a good closing thought for me is just kind of something I said earlier is just, both employers and veterans alike, just be patient, for veterans, take the time to really try and figure out what it is you're looking for, rather than just, we've all seen those people in units that say, "Oh, I got this job offer," like you were saying, for $100,000. And, in the transition program on base that you have to take, they always do this thing where they calculate all your benefits and then they give you a number of what a company is supposed to pay you that would be equivalent to what you're doing now. It's a scare tactic, in my opinion, that they use to try and keep people in, because they told me I had to make $100,000 to be equivalent to what I was worth as a captain. And I was like, that's not true. That's not, you're giving a number to me. And that's not necessarily what I value. I'm looking for a little more stability, the ability to be home with my wife and kids. So that number that you've given me is not actually necessarily what I'm looking for. And so, both employer and employee, just be patient with each other and be willing to, I think something Robert said was that he called people and talked about their resumes, even if they weren't going to hire that person. I think, employers could really learn to do things like that, to be honest and have those kind of discussions with veterans, even if they're not going to hire them or the veteran. Same thing with the veteran, right? You know, if you're not going to go with a company, be willing to tell that company why. You know, maybe they can appeal themselves to more veterans if they get some honest feedback. In my particular role, I'm really kind of happy with my job, and I brought in several people. One is actually a guy that was one of my troops when I was in the horse. He's my assistant project manager now. He's working on his degree. He wants to be a PM, so he wants to take my job eventually. And I encourage him to do it. You know, I think no matter what we do as veterans, advocating, you know, for our people, whether it's bringing them on to where we work, or, you know, I take it as a personal, I don't want to say duty, but as a former captain, whether people reach out to me or I reach out to them, I take it as a personal kind of responsibility to continue to look after not even guys that were my troops. I always have people, you know, ask me, their kids are thinking about going into the military or this, that, and whatever. I always take it as a personal responsibility to continue to steward people and give them good advice towards whatever it is they're looking for that'll make them happy. You know, obviously I pitch what I do for a living and I say, hey, this is a really good job. This is good for me. This is why. But I'm constantly building my network of people because I get random messages from buddies or people, you know, that I served with or whatever all the time. And, you know, they're looking for work and they're like, hey, Cap, you know, you always took really good care of us when we were in, you know, do you know anywhere I could work? Do you have anybody, you know, and a lot of times the first thing I ask them is, okay, do you really know what you're looking for? You know? And so for me, that's kind of, you know, my concluding thought is I continue to try and help not only veterans, but every employer I've worked for since I got out of the military. I try to help them understand because they do have that perspective. Well, Jake, you're a veteran. You know, this is what our expectations are. And I try to sit down and have real conversations about, if you really want to hire veterans, you know, these are the things that I think are gaps between what your company's doing now and where they should be, in my opinion. But and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. You know, I worked for companies that I gave them a wealth of information about how to get connected to SkillBridge, for instance. And it just kind of sat on someone's desk. And I was like, you know, that's an opportunity you guys are missing to take advantage of a program where you don't have to pay somebody for up to 6 months. And you're helping a veteran out, you know?
Yeah, and I'll close with one of the things that I try to be very careful of is preference, right? So I manage all types of people here at Talon, and some of them are veterans and some of them aren't. And at the end of the day, everyone has their own value that they bring to the team. And so, you know, that just because I will go out of my way to help a veteran with their resume, you know, when I work with people, we develop relationships that transcend employers and years and decades and with all types of people. And I think that at the end of the day, all of us are developing relationships every day. I think that, you know, our experience in the military provides a good base of reasons why to develop those relationships. And as we leave, we continue to develop those relationships because we know it is so important to know a guy. You know, whether you need a new sleeping bag and you need to know a guy in supply to get it, or if I've got a drill rig broken down and I need this wonky hydraulic motor that, you know, they only made between 1998 and 2001, I got to know a guy to get it. And so I try to be very careful about ensuring that anybody that I work with doesn't feel like I place anybody else on a different value pedestal over anybody else, because everybody brings their own value to the team. And going back to what we discussed earlier, making sure that veterans have the skills to communicate the value that they bring outside of their MOS code or their leadership courses or whatever. At the end of the day, we're all people and we all bring human values to the table, and helping people to understand that credentials are super important to some people, but most people, I don't think that they are. I think at the end of the day, people want to work with good people who want to do good work. And so how are you going to help me on that mission of being a good person and doing good work? So anyway, I'm always open to help anybody in this industry, regardless of veteran status, but also always willing to help out with veterans trying to transition. And I wish I got more phone calls in that regard, honestly. Jake, I'm sure you as well. There's the people that know you, but there's any number of people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, and it's like, I'm not going to seek out and say, hey, can I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? I've got a lot of crap going on. But I see some people out there floundering, and I wish that they would ask for help more, and I guess that's the last closing thought is, if you need help, ask. It's a chess match in the civilian world about giving up enough information to get something, but not so much that you're vulnerable. And man, that's a tough place to be. I try to be open with everybody about what's going on and how I feel. And I've gone through periods where I don't do that. And the only thing that I get out of that is not being in a good place. So just be open and honest with everybody. And I think that most people are good and they want to help, So anyway, thank you for giving us this opportunity, Brock. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for your service and my friendship with both of you. I value your knowledge and opinions, and this discussion today has been beyond what I could have expected to help our industry and just hear what you guys are thinking and what's going on.
I want to thank you for joining the Driller for the Driller Newscast episode 37. Jake and Robert dropped some big knowledge on us, and it's a lot for us to think about, from benefits to understanding good leaders and good bosses are there to hear their people and have their back. And what is important to them? Is it benefits? Is it cash in the bank? Continue to follow what's happening with COP27 in Egypt. It's very important, and we have to be involved in it. I know we just went through an election and there are many different opinions, but climate change is real. It's not severe weather. We're seeing droughts throughout the country. We're seeing severe flooding, and then the Mississippi still being way down and almost unnavigable. Finally, the Department of the Interior versus the Navajo Nation. When those opening arguments hit, we need to be paying attention to what's happening there. This is all happening as we see with the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law pumping more and more money into drought resilience in the Western United States. These are all big topics. If you're wondering where safety is right now, we need to keep our people focused towards the end of the year. It's almost Thanksgiving, it's deer season. Then it's going to be NGWA, IGSPA, and Christmas. So we got a lot to keep our people focused so we can stay safe and enjoy these great conventions and holidays. Have a great week.